Hello, everybody. Welcome to Culture Codes, the podcast. I'm Felicitas, unpacking cultural influence at the intersection of brand, product, and innovation every week. You can find us on culturecodes.substack.com. Today, we're talking about beauty. We're talking about data. We're talking about reviews. We're talking about the real, unfiltered conversations happening between consumers that many brands hardly detect. If you've been following closely on Culture Codes, this is a topic made for us to cover. And our guest today is Lily Twelftree, founder of Barefaced Media, a beauty business podcast, and now also the creator of Unfiltered, a new recommendations and review-based data platform that sits between consumers and brands. Her work is changing how beauty companies read culture, understand demand, and make decisions, not through hype, but through real evidence. In this conversation, we're diving into how beauty culture is shifting, how consumers have become the new R&D department, and what it really takes to build a data-led platform. We'll explore how reviews reveal cultural truths and what every brand can learn from Lily's approach, bridging the gap between consumers' reality and brand fantasy. Welcome, Lily. It's so great to have you.
Thanks for having me. That's such a kind intro. I'm so flattered. That's
You're
so
welcome.
cool.
You're welcome. Well, I was really excited when I came across Barefaced and Unfiltered for the first time, and I was like, I have to have her on. And here you are.
When you put it so succinctly, like I get asked what I do all the time, and I'm like, consumer data beauty stuff. But when you put it like that, like I'm going to use that. That was great. It made me sound so clever.
Definitely. Steal all the way. Happy to. But, I know you now a little bit, but, our listeners, of course, don't know you that well yet. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, share a little bit about your background? You're running Barefaced, now also soon, Unfiltered. Tell us who you are and what you're building.
Totally. So I guess maybe it's easy if I give a little bit of context on kind of my career and how I got here. So I went straight out of school and started a computer science degree. I was good at maths at school. It was the only thing I really liked, but I didn't want to do a maths degree. So I picked computer science, and then I did that for all of like 4 or 5 weeks. And I just couldn't see myself working in big tech. I really, really wanted to be in the beauty industry, much to the disappointment of my parents. I was like, I really want to work in consumer. I was fascinated by the world. Like I very much grew up on beauty YouTube and kind of the way that beauty was being used as this medium for culture. Like fashion in so many ways is kind of a bit out of reach. Or like you'll never wear the same jacket as Kylie Jenner, but you'll wear the same blush. Like I was just fascinated by where beauty sat in culture as kind of, it's not affordable, but it's more affordable than fashion. And I was enamored by that world. So I sent a cold email to one of the founders of my favorite Aussie beauty brands. And to my surprise, she offered me an internship. So I got in my airconless car and drove from little old Adelaide to Sydney. And then I worked in beauty for about 5 years in Sydney. And in that time, there was this buzzword, this data-driven buzzword in every job description, in every marketing boardroom. Everyone was talking about being data-driven. And I was like, what does that mean? And everyone would tell me, particularly like, the execs and then the people in the leadership positions, that was the direction that the industry was heading. And it just seemed everyone was on the same page about that, yet no one was doing that type of work. No one was actually sitting and crunching the numbers. And I was working at a global skincare company at the time, and I sat in the global brand team, but then we had all of the different individual markets that had access to all of this sales data. The company had a lot of its own retail stores, so we had heaps of POS capture, heaps of loyalty capture, and then we would get into these marketing meetings making 6-figure decisions, doing nothing other than looking left and right at what our competitors were doing. And that blew my mind. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Everyone's telling me it's data driven, but then we've got all this data and no one knows how to make sense of it. Yeah. From there, I decided I was going to go back to uni and study data science. And in that time, I was also just doing a bunch of freelancing work, and I freelanced for 6 months at a fashion brand in Australia that's had one of the most successful rebrands in Aussie history. And they had 2 in-house data scientists. So in that role, in that 6 months, I really saw how those 2 people had been, but kind of the backbone of so many of these decisions that were really powering the brand forwards, and the way that they were actually able to, they're building out collections 2 years in advance. So when they're actually making those types of decisions, when you look at trend forecasting and how that's changed, they were able to think they were doing like a category expansion. And so what they wanted to see was that, like, okay, people are buying what type of shirts? If we're going to do a new line of upper body wear, what do you even call that? Um what should that be? And I found
Mhm.
that fascinating. And so then from there, actually, in the background of all of that, I started posting TikToks, which was kind of on a whim. I always wanted beauty content around why we buy instead of what to buy. I kind of got exhausted by getting online, and anytime I loved interacting with the beauty world, but it was always like, buy this, or this is the best, this is the worst, like really opinionated on product-based conversations. And I was way more fascinated in brand and in kind of like, why do people fake tan? Why do people love getting their nails done? Why has road popped off? Or like all of these types of why questions that there's a lot of people covering it now, but this was in 2019, 2020, particularly in that short form video style. Journalists that were doing a fantastic
Yeah.
job on the written end, and have been for decades, but on social media. And so I started making videos about that. And then from there, as I was getting better at uni and getting more technical, I started making more content around data, particularly trends, search trends, and that kind of introduced a wave of inbound interest from brands for consulting. And this is a very long-winded explanation for that. That's kind of where Unfiltered was birthed, was like, how do we turn this from a service in helping brands understand the beauty consumer into a tool, more or less.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I never thought about beauty as the ultimate democratizer. Now, when you brought the Kylie example, that is so true. That is such a great parallel to draw on. Thank you for saying that. And equally, I'm fascinated why people do certain things. That's what we're looking at on Culture Codes. But of course, you're doing this through the lens of beauty specifically, which is so fascinating as this is such a fast evolving space. You know, when I looked you up, you were really able to quickly build an audience from your early TikToks to now the podcast. What do you think is really important when doing so? And how did you start doing that? How did you find people who were equally obsessed about the why and wanted to follow you?
I think content is as much about quality as it is about quantity. I've never really nailed the quantity piece, but the
Hmm.
quality piece, I think so much of content now, because there's so much of it, is about ease of creation. And so it doesn't take much to be in the top 5 to 10% of content online. If you just do that extra piece of research, I think my strength has always been in research. I'm not a writer. I'm barely a computer scientist, but like I can really go to the crux of a story. And if you kind of, what I've found is go that step further, like you see
Hmm.
someone talk about something interesting on TikTok, and then you take the time to Google it, and then you cross reference, and then maybe you watch some YouTube, and then you go through like the internet archives. You then kind of get this web of a story that allows you as, I guess, the influencer. It's so funny because it's absolutely influencer, but the content's never been about me. It's never been about my life. I've always been kind of reporting on something that I think where I found my little corner of the internet was being in the person that people could rely on to go
Right.
that deeper and have that quality piece. I'd say that's kind of, yeah, how I've been able to find a little corner. But that said, it's the quality and quantity balance. They're equally important. I've always really, really struggled with the consistency element because I'm so obsessed with the depth, particularly with the podcast. Like I really, and hopefully in the new year, want to make it bi-weekly, but there's so many hours and hours of research that goes into telling a story like the ones that we tell, that thankfully I have some help now. But even then, they're so effortful. And I think that's why they resonate. But it's a balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. I think you've got something investigative going on, and I think people love that. And that's, as you're saying, and that's how you build an audience and they start following. And it's almost that investigative journalism curiosity that you're now taking into your new venture. What was the moment when you realized that the real story, as you said, was consumer reviews and conversations?
Yeah, it was in the consulting work I was doing, like how it would kind of work. Like most of the consulting work I've done has been in the NPD, like new product development
Hmm.
space. So a brand will come to me and they'll be like, we really want to understand the direction of culture. And so we'll start by looking at what already exists in the market in their category or in their subcategory, pardon me, and then cross-referencing that with the interest in those products to try and figure out, is there a white space and what does that look like? Big gap for me there was that if we look at search trends or we look at sales data or any type of existing data pool, you can only buy something or search for something that already exists. So people, that was all reflective data. We were relying so much what the current consumer was doing rather than what that consumer wasn't getting from those products. And that difference of intent and in predictability came from reviews. It was like you could see in the sales data that they'd bought this body cream, but did they like it? Had they
Yeah.
used it? Had it replaced something? All of this context was being lost. So I spent so much time scraping Reddit and organizing Reddit reviews. Like Unfiltered really started by, I thought if I had an organized, categorized database of all of these Reddit reviews that I was having to scrape all the time, then I could do my consulting work at a higher volume and with better access, because anytime you do anything like that, it takes so long. You have to recategorize everything, and I wanted a larger pool of reviews. I was like, if I just had that and I could query my own data, that would be sick. And then realized from there, the next learning was that reviews are the juice, but the real insight is in routines. It's in, did they like it is the first question, but then what are they using it with? What are they using it with? Where did I buy it from? Did it replace something? All of these types of contextual questions were things that brands wanted to know, but they were equally things that consumers wanted to know. That's why we were finding these conversations on Reddit forums, because there were conversations that were happening organically, but hadn't been put in a format that made sense for beauty. It was
Yeah.
all Reddit. It was all kind of community-based forums that are not designed to be scraped. They're not designed for beauty consumers in mind. So then it kind of evolved into this idea of this two-sided platform, which is Unfiltered, where we're B2B to C. So it's really a consumer beauty social app. But then the monetization piece is in those reviews and feeding that data back into brands. And the idea is of getting like authentic customer voice into boardrooms. Like if you could be sitting in a boardroom and query what consumers are actually saying right then and there. If anyone's worked in beauty brands before, there's this huge disconnect between what happens on the shop floor and the execs that are making these huge budget decisions, that kind of connecting those two is where I landed.
Is where the sweet spot is for Unfiltered.
Yeah.
Fascinating and so much needed. Yeah, uh, community sentiment in the boardroom. I get goosebumps when I hear that. That's so true and so much needed. Less innovating in isolation in a vacuum, more like keeping an ear to the ground.
Mm.
You touched a little bit upon it, on how it actually works. Where do you think the biggest differentiator will be for Unfiltered, given the fact that you said in the beginning, actually, that big data and data-driven is such a buzzword and there's a lot of data to look at? What's your vision on making this really, I guess, sexy and accessible, both for people who are going to come onto Unfiltered to input their data, as much as the brands on the other end being able to access and review it?
I guess I'll start with the brand side. Like, I think something that's really crazy about consumer data in general is the way that you kind of look at the big guys, you look at your Nielsen's and your Circanas. They not brag, but they really sell the idea of panel data. So having people capture everything that the entire home buys and then being able to look at that again within context. The whole thing that they're selling is in context. But what blows my mind is they really sell that has been the industry standard for 50 plus years. If you can find me any other tech enabled industry where something that's been done for 50 years is a good thing, I would be mind blown. Like I can't, like, the fact that everyone's like, oh, but this is how we've done it. I'm like, but you look anywhere else, you look at manufacturing, you look at ops, you look at e-com, you look at any other facet of the industry outside of insights, and everything has been more or less revolutionized. Yet the way that we're listening to consumers hasn't changed. And so you've kind of now got these monopolies over, and it's not even a customer voice, it's really like shopping data, which is slightly different. But the types of insight that these brands want they're authentic and organic conversations that are happening online. They're just not able to access them. These are the types of communities that are thriving and have been for decades, but they've just never been given somewhere to live. So I think on the consumer side, these types of platforms are alive and well. You've got Letterbox, you've got
Yeah.
Goodreads, you've got so many almost anti-social media platforms that are given to these really engaged communities, and no one's built one for beauty, which there was Makeup Alley, there's been other people that have existed, but never in this kind of mobile first, built on top of the social experience type of
Mhm.
ways. Where we really want to start is I did some early like consumer research with a bunch of teenagers after I read some crazy report that when a teenager finds an app that they enjoy, they share it with an average of 4 friends. Because as a teenager, the value of the app is entirely related to how many of your friends are using it. And that number drops to 1.5 as soon as you hit, I think it's 21 or 22. So I was like, that's crazy. The money is in the teenagers. And I have a teenage sister, and they were using this music app, no interest to me, but all of her friends were on it. I'm like,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
crazy
The
because
value comes from the community actually versus the individual. I love that.
exactly, the network effect of all of it, that's really
Yep.
what we're building. Again, with, beauty reviews, you only really trust your friends. Like, you absolutely look at a TikTok review, but what we found with these teenagers is that they go straight to the comment section. They'll see someone talking about a product, they'll immediately assume that it's somehow paid or compensated for or gifted in some way, even if there's no indication of that. And then
Mhm.
instead, they go to the comments and begin this filtering process of trying to find someone that looks like them. There was one girl in the group that had chronic skin picking. So she had really, really sensitive skin. Another girl was really acne prone. So they were trying to find real people in the comment section that looked and lived like them. So the idea where we really want to get to is if we can replace that behavior, as soon as you see that video of someone talking about that product,
Mhm.
if you can share it to Unfiltered, where you know is a trusted source, there's no ads, there's no product placements, and we can automatically show you reviews from people that do look and live like you because you have a profile, so we know all of your skin quirks and things. That's really where we want to start, as being like the home of consumer trust.
So this is absolutely, I think that's so true. I think AI is just, AI created content is just going to increase and fuel that distrust. And so,
Absolutely.
especially for teenage age where beauty is such an important, and expression and appearance and where you're going through so much of your body is so important.
Mm,
Those trusted sources will become important as much as actually being able to share this in a safe space. Because, I mean, I'm a millennial, dealing with acne is something that, when you're getting older, you sort of like develop the confidence to deal with it. But when you're teenage age,
mm.
you know how to handle it. You don't really know what to take and what really helps. Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was that learning coupled with that this time last year, our big retailer here in Mecca, I was
Hmm.
doing an analysis on the brand side of things of their holiday collection, and as a byproduct of that, I had this Google sheet that I then shared on TikTok, and I was like, "Guys, if you wanna see the best cost per mil for all of these," like, just a tool to make sense of the marketing noise. It was used by, like, 2,300 people, which wasn't that crazy, but it was 60,000 product links. People were coming back to the sheet all the way throughout the year, way long past the holiday collection had even gone, just because they wanted a point of reference, like an objective,
Yeah.
opinionless tool to make sense of all of this marketing that's just become beauty's baseline. Beauty's become a marketer's industry. I'm a marketer at my heart. I love marketing, but also there has to be the value. Actually, how do I phrase this? A brand cutting through the noise now has become more about marketing budget than it has like product efficacy. That I think as it's gotten harder and harder to cut through the noise on social and be heard on social, we've just got these mega brands. Like, look at the celebrity of beauty and how that's just become the backbone of the industry, because you need a vessel of cutting through, rather than if we can somehow, even in a minor way, flip that back towards the best products are having the cut through. Like early TikTok, it was the CeraVes. Now we're 5 years in, and I love Rare and Road, but it's those types of
No, you're,
brand.
you're absolutely right. And I think the large companies, like L'Oreal, are looking to this and are
Mm,
wondering, what do I do
yeah.
in a world where just like the big influencer brands are making it? And that's so true. And I think at the same time, you see there is a very hungry beauty consumer on the one end, but there's a lot of product fatigue happening as well, because I think it's such a high turnover and brands are forced to come out with the next thing very quickly and innovate, but it's not always proven to be the right, most efficient thing, like you're saying.
It's the fast fashionification of beauty. Like, it's
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
constant NPD, it's this constant newness, which is interesting because that definitely existed back in 2016. You would have one of the beauty gurus every other week doing, like, new in videos, and so we had
Yeah.
this really defined timeline of knowing when a brand had released something new. That doesn't happen anymore. New products are more just, like, different bets in the betting machine of the algorithm of, like, will this one resonate? Will this one resonate? And because we're the way that social media is positioned now, you wanna make as many of those bets as possible because you don't know what will have cut through. So you're not investing as much in R&D, you're investing more in number of attempts. So we're just becoming more and more trend driven and kind of chasing our own tails. Because if you've got the big guys looking at what's happening online, okay, everyone's doing lip tints and skin milks. So I guess we'll do that. So then suddenly we've got 30 of those rather than any other category that anyone's interested in, because that's the data that we have access to. We've got that amount of insight into what people are searching, what people are watching. But there's actually, particularly when you look at the demographic level, like what are Black girls looking for? What are 50 plus women looking for?
Yeah.
There's a lot more use cases and need stakes that need to be served, but we just don't have visibility of them.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you mentioned 2016. I think Glossier was founded in 2014. And I would say as a reaction to an overload, we had the Kylie lip kits just before and all of that, like really heavy makeup. And then we had the clean girl era that's now, I think, going to come to an end. At least here in the US, I think we're seeing signs that, actually the maximalism is going to come back. But as a reaction to it, and then to your point, so many copycats, because that was then the data that was there in terms of, okay, I guess that's what that's what a consumer wants. It's so fascinating from a brand building perspective. You touched upon it a little bit, but how do you think companies need to evolve their own decision making to either not be stuck in that trend cycle, not spending enough on R&D, and actually allowing for consumer driven processes in a better way? And to what extent there's obviously Unfiltered, a tool that's hopefully going to help them solve that. But do you think to a certain extent their hands are also tied to date?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think it's kind of a problem that marketing teams in particular have struggled with so long, where often the person that's most clued in is like the most junior. It's the people that are answering the DMs. It's the people that are reading all the comments or people are on the shop floor. It's people that are interacting with the consumer each day that are how you get people in decision-making positions closer to that has been a struggle point of the industry as long as I've been in it. But in terms of decision-making, like I'm so biased because I have such visibility on how I hope Unfiltered can be the piece of that pie. Because I think what we really want to do is we're starting as a data as a service, so it's really kind of plugging and playing into existing dashboards that are in Excel sheets that everyone's looking at. Because I think the last thing people want is another tool promising you everything, and it's in some tab that takes forever to load on some screen, and only one person in the only one business analyst is really looking at it. But then beyond that is that, like, can we gain the consumer intelligence, the customer voice at scale, so we can actually build some sort of intelligence that we can then make those types of decisions in marketers' language. Like, again, beauty is a marketers driven industry. Of course, there's so many other teams involved, but can you just ask a chatbot or something, what are 50-year-old women searching for? What do they want? What are ingredients? What are benefits? Those types of, questions that we already ask on a smaller scale for our personal lives, can we find a way to integrate them into an industry with enough statistical relevance to actually be helpful? Because I think there's a lot of tools now that infer a lot. You can, if we wanted to do something that was pretty average, I could do that directly from Reddit. Like, there's enough online already. It's just not structured or scaled in a way that you would want to bet a 6-figure type, L'Oreal MPD decision. Forget 6 figures, 7 figures. Like, there's no data source yet that's at the scale of particularly for beauty that can enable that. Like, I got asked the other day, if I should be worried about kind of like your Nielsen's or Circana's catching up. And I was like, look, I've seen inside those platforms, they don't have the scale themselves either. Like you kind of, this is why it's consumer first. It's social first because that is the value there. Sorry, but back to your question about decision making. I think it's going to have to be like a reteach and learn piece on
Mhm.
our end. I don't think I'm not delusional enough into thinking that we're going to have this access and then be like, okay, guys, pay for it and be off with it. There will be a self-service arm in helping brands understand how it can integrate into existing structures and procedures and ways of working. And I think
On KPIs, no, because I think there has to be a change in terms of how things are going to be tested,
totally.
what success looks like, and there has to be a reshift towards that consumer lens versus too much brand focus, probably. Yeah.
And we'll have to prove that as well. Like I think a huge part for us as soon as we have the tech to be able to enable this, like we've already been in conversations with a couple different B2B partners about piloting this because we want
Mhm.
use cases into the big guys, into not even the big guys, but into real brands that are making these types of decisions to not only figure out how they'll use it, like the lowest hanging fruit, frankly, but then also to be able to prove the
Yeah.
commercial value in having access to these types of things. Because I think it's all well and good for everyone to, when we chat about it, to be able to see the need, but also these are existing beasts of companies. Like they have ways that have worked for a really long time that being
Yeah.
able to actually prove kind of, a launch with or without it, or not even a launch, but yeah, there's so many different use cases, or even if it's like in copywriting language or just yeah, showing the granular way that having authentic customer voice can actually be used
Yeah.
in-house, I think will be our second of many learnings and pain
Yeah.
points.
I can imagine. What's been the hardest so far? I think is it fundraising? Is it understanding what needs to be built? Is it finding a right team?
All of the
All
above.
of it. Yeah.
It's the thing I struggle on the day-to-day, I think, is bouncing between the B2B and the B2C. I find
Right.
really tricky because they're kind of none without the other, but they're also and it really is one solution, but in the same breath, having to communicate both without forgetting who I'm like talking to, or like sometimes because I spend a lot of time talking to brands and I really understand the B2B now really well, that I'll be chatting about it at like a party or with a friend or like,
Yeah.
kind of using it as a testing ground for consumer, which thankfully we've already got the insight into the fact that people want it, but on more kind of a would you use this? What would you want type of a chat? I then just jump into my B2B language and they're like, huh? Like, I don't care. I don't care about data. Like, I want to know that I'm safe and my privacy
Yeah.
is good, but like, how is that going to help me save money? Like,
Yeah.
how is that going to help me? But how is that going to help my skin? Like, it can't be too not even altruistic, like too I don't know, because then I'm like, we can change the industry. And again, the average consumer doesn't give a shit about that. It's like people that are in the industry that care about that. I think that's been hard. Thankfully, I was able to kind of test my own theories about what people want and that via my social channels. And from that, I had a lot of inbound interest in people that really wanted to be involved in building of Unfiltered, which is the coolest thing
Mhm.
ever and a great
Yeah.
insight into us being onto something. But in saying that, it's so hard to scale an intern team or like to have, expectations of people that just want to be a part of something, or even the learning of even on the advisor side and strategic investor side, like you've only kind of got 100 slices of this equity pie really, and figuring out how to slice and dice that in the best interest of the company, and then also trying to get money for those same pieces. It's like a whole lot of imaginary figures, which is kind of a mind juggle that's been probably the biggest learning, like
Yeah.
trying to find a figure in which I'm like, okay, this is my perceived commercial value of where we're at. This is where I think we're going. And then communicating that to people outside of beauty. Because again, the reason I decided to fundraise was that I had so many of these meetings where people just wanted the product. They were
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is cool. Like, can we
Where is it?
pilot it?
Yeah.
And I was like, it doesn't exist. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just chipping away at it. Like, I was like, that's again a really great insight. But like, this is what I really think we're onto is a venture backed company, something that's going to scale quickly. I really want to
Yeah.
be the social platform for beauty, and doing that without capital has been really, really tricky. So now, kind of going into this fundraise, hopefully to hit the ground running really, really hard in mid Jan. It's been learning how to, I think I can sell the problem. I'm okay at selling the solution, but then knowing how to sell the industry, to sell the market. Because when you're chatting to
Yeah.
VCs, most of them aren't in beauty, but the most of them aren't even in consumer. So being like,
That's so
we're in
interesting.
consumer, but we're also not. We're a B2B software product. It's the comms and the sales and the pitching has been, yeah, huge learning curve. And people are not lying when they say that raising is a full-time job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is that I love that. That's almost like one of the hot takes I wanted to ask you, any recommendations you have for other founders who are in a similar stage? Okay, so fundraising is one. Any others that you want to share?
But
Yeah.
I would say, like, starting with organic social, like having a testing ground for your own theories, particularly if you're consumer, particularly if like it's a consumer brand or a consumer facing product, having some sort of point of contact for that person that you envision being an early adopter, being an early user has been wildly helpful. Like I'm in the DMs on Instagram with people that have flown over from TikTok just so we have a place of chatting back and forth. I have probably 5 to 10 people I talk to every other day in just getting insights, getting perspective, getting outside my own working from home by myself head, like having kind of people that are really interested, but also aren't financially involved or invested. They just love the concept, and having them as a, yeah, going back and forth and being able to chat through your own preconceived ideas of what it is you think you're building, because often that's really not the
Yeah.
case. And then as an extension of that, why being able to talk to users, like the types of people in like your head of insights, your head of marketing, or not even like people far more junior than that, people that I envision using this every day. Kind of the thing that's been so great about my social is that because it's B2B focused, I get so many inbound emails and messages from people that are in the industry, then being able to ask them those types of questions. It's so helpful to imagine your product outside your own background. Like, for example, I got on a call with someone in the UK who works in advertising the other day, and she was chatting me through like a huge issue they have is they spent all this money, all of this advertising budget on these events for kind of like your magazines, but they've got no
Yeah.
insight as to whether the people that were gifted actually went and repurchased. So then suddenly I'm like, oh, what if Unfiltered was a tool for tracking like, post-event purchasing behavior?
Yeah.
Like if you rock up to an event and they know your Unfiltered ID or username, can we then feed that back to the hosts of the event to see what happened post the event? Like just all those types of things that's not my background. I couldn't tell you the difference between advertising and PR 5 years ago, but having an inbound, I think inbound is the most important part because of course you can do outbound, but there's only so many hours in the
Yeah.
day. Inbound interest in your world and what you're trying to build just opens your eyes up so much more than you could ever do building in stealth, I would
It's
say.
almost like your own feedback loop, right?
Completely. A
Yeah.
feedback loop before there's even a product to get a feedback
Exactly.
loop,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
from the outset, and I think that's what has been, to your earlier question, maybe tricky about the fundraise is communicating the amount of that work that has been done pre-product. Like, we've got the distribution, we've got the channels where we've already got, like, probably 10 to 15 ICPs engaging with, like, Substacks and podcasts and
Yeah.
inbound interest all the time, that communicating that we're that far along pre-product has been interesting because it's I think it's just a creator-led
It is 100% creator-led
business.
approach that you're driving, because I think people know you or come across also through what you have created with Barefaced already, and see what you're able to do and what your tone and style and focus is, and so that probably draws in a lot of people through TikTok as well.
For sure, and I think that's the part that's been tricky to communicate to some investors, because some investors completely get that, and then others, it's a very new way of doing things. It's kind of like, "Okay, but you don't have an MVP."
Uh-huh.
And so then it's kind of going, "Well, we've actually got access to, like, 50,000 Reddit reviews, and I use them in my consulting work, and this is how much we've driven from those," but that's not a software product. So kind of showing ways of validation that are different, and this is kind of the point of startups, is that every brand and company is completely different, but that's been tricky.
Thank you so much for sharing that so honestly and openly. And I'm sure this is valuable to many people who are either getting on the journey to build something or have an idea, or maybe don't, have that fear of not knowing where to go to for initial feedback, because I can imagine it's also your baby in a way, and so you maybe don't want any critique, So thank you. Appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of listeners will find this super insightful. Do you see barefaced and unfiltered connected? Do you think that, it's going to be two separate things? Are you thinking about this more like a brand, like a world building experiment that you're going under, or is one going to be more the media, sort of like voice in company and ecosystem, and the other one is really sort of that research arm that you're building?
I really hope that barefaced kind of becomes synonymous with the podcast. Like, I really see kind of
Yeah.
barefaced as simply like a name of the B2B arm of Unfiltered, which I spend way too much time thinking about like the comms of that, and part of me like having to re-educate the audience. Like, it's not that big. Like, people will get over. Like, it's you get so caught up in the most ridiculous things. I see Unfiltered as the platform, as the name of the app, as really probably when it comes down to marketing, the consumer angle, and then I see barefaced as the B2B angle and kind of this distribution arm for engaging with people that would be interested in accessing the platform. Scaling both is something that I will not even think about for a while.
Not right now, for later. Yes.
Barefaced is doing well enough on both sides of the spectrum, getting engagement from people that just love beauty as well as people that work in it. And I think the difference is really in platform. Like, the Substack and the podcast are mostly people that work in the industry or want to work in the industry or are kind of uniquely engaged, which is really, really valuable. And then TikTok, I don't really do other socials. TikTok is more the consumer that's obsessed with brand and obsessed with product and obsessed in.
And the newness of it.
Yeah, and I get added to a lot of like lists of people to follow when you're in a no buy or just like a no buy period, or kind of building that trust, I think. As like, I've never done an ad with a beauty brand intentionally. I've never taken money outside of consulting work from a beauty brand. It's only ever been so kind of being really intentional about the point of those platforms, I would say. So I really, Bareface is an extension of Unfiltered, I believe. But I think it makes a lot of sense eventually to have a B2B and a B2C comms arm, but not for a while. But
Not for a while. Exciting plans. I'm so excited about what you're building and wish you the best of success with it. I will be closely following, that's for sure. So thank you so much, Lily, for sharing your story today. Everyone, if you like this episode, please subscribe and share. You can find us, of course, on Substack, but also on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you so much, Lily, and hope to see you soon.
thanks for having me.